The alien queen told the human soldier, "Remove your armor," then froze as she looked at his face. Nathan Drake stood at attention in the grand hall, his boots echoing softly against the marble floor. The room was silent except for the occasional rustle of the Vartal guards' armor, their eyes trained on him. The vast chamber stretched upward, its high ceilings adorned with intricate alien carvings, glowing softly in the dim light. The air was thick with tension. As a human soldier in a galaxy filled with advanced alien civilizations, Nathan had seen many things, but nothing prepared him for this moment. He had been summoned before Queen Alira, the ruler of the Vartal Empire. A peaceful negotiation, it was supposed to be. A simple treaty to ensure that humans and Vartals would coexist without further conflict. But things had already gone wrong. The Vartals, despite their great technological advances, were suspicious of humanity. They thought humans were too young, too naive, too weak to be of any importance. Nathan had been sent to represent Earth, not knowing how far the Vartals would push him. They had laughed at his attempts to negotiate. They had mocked humanity's limited technologies, their weapons, and their ships. Now here he was, standing before their queen, waiting for what came next. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Queen Alira sat upon her throne, a grand, elaborate structure raised high above the room. Her long, dark hair flowed like silk, and her piercing green eyes studied him carefully, never leaving his face. She was regal, beautiful in a way that made him feel both awe and fear. The queen had the power to crush entire worlds with the flick of her hand, and Nathan knew it. After a long silence, Alira's voice rang out across the chamber, deep and commanding. "Captain Nathan Drake, human representative of Earth, step forward." Nathan didn't hesitate. His boots clicked softly against the marble as he moved closer to the queen. His heart raced, but his expression remained neutral. He had been trained to face dangerous situations without flinching. But even so, standing before an alien queen who ruled an empire was different from anything he had ever encountered. "Alira, Queen of the Vartals, I stand before you in the name of peace," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the tension that gripped his body. He had delivered this line 100 times before in various diplomatic settings, but now it felt different. Now the stakes were higher. The queen did not reply immediately. Instead, she studied him with an intensity that made Nathan feel as if she was peering into his soul. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving his face. Then, without warning, she spoke again, but this time her tone was different, soft, almost curious. "Remove your armor." Nathan froze for a moment, his eyes widening in confusion. He had been expecting many things, challenges, questions, perhaps even threats, but not this. The queen's demand was unexpected, strange even. Vartal warriors never removed their armor in public, especially not in the presence of a foreign soldier. Armor was a symbol of strength, of status. To remove it was to expose oneself, to show vulnerability. But the queen's eyes locked onto his, unwavering, and Nathan knew there was no room for hesitation. He had been trained to follow orders without question, especially in situations like this. Slowly, he reached for the clasps of his armor, his fingers stiff with unease. The entire room watched him in silence as he carefully peeled away the heavy plates of his suit. Each movement was deliberate, as if removing his armor would somehow reveal a hidden truth about him. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing second. As he finally stood before them, stripped of his armor, Nathan felt exposed in more ways than one. His muscles ached from the long hours spent in the suit, and the cool air of the chamber brushed against his skin. He was still wearing his military uniform underneath, but it felt flimsy compared to the heavy protective armor. His body was not as strong as the Vartal soldiers who surrounded him, but he had trained his entire life to become the best. For a long moment, there was silence. The queen said nothing, her eyes still fixed on him. Her expression was unreadable, though her gaze seemed to soften ever so slightly. The guards behind her exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was happening. Nathan stood still, his heart pounding in his chest, waiting for some sign from the queen. He felt her gaze bore into him, as if she was searching for something beyond his human appearance. He was beginning to wonder if he had done something wrong, if his presence was somehow insulting to her. The queen's face remained unmoving, but there was something in her eyes, something ancient, something familiar. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You." "You are him," Nathan blinked, caught off guard by the words. I beg your pardon, your majesty. Elira's eyes didn't leave his face. You are the one from the prophecy. The words hit Nathan like a bolt of lightning. What was she talking about? Prophecy. He wasn't anything special, just a soldier sent to represent Earth. The idea that he could be part of some ancient prediction felt impossible, absurd even. His brow furrowed, trying to make sense of what she was saying. The prophecy, she continued, her voice more urgent now. The human who would come to change the fate of my people, the one who would stand at my side and reshape the galaxy. Nathan's mind raced. He had heard whispers of ancient prophecies in his training, but they were always distant, vague stories that didn't seem to apply to him or anyone he knew. They were old legends from the past, told to inspire hope or fear. He had never believed them. He couldn't believe them now. I think there's been some mistake, Your Majesty, Nathan said, shaking his head. I'm just a soldier, I don't know anything about any prophecy. But Elira's eyes never wavered. She stood slowly, her gaze still locked on him. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as she took a step toward him. She stopped just in front of him, so close that Nathan could feel the heat from her body, her presence commanding the very space around them. You carry the mark, she said softly, almost to herself, the mark of the warrior, the one who would rise against the odds. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. Mark? What mark? He had no idea what she meant, but her words stirred something deep inside him, a feeling he couldn't place. He had always known he was different, but this was beyond anything he could understand. The Queen's voice grew stronger as she spoke again, her tone filled with an intensity that Nathan couldn't ignore. The time has come, human, the galaxy is changing, and you, she paused, looking him up and down. You are part of that change. Nathan stood frozen, his mind racing, his heart beating in his chest. What had he gotten himself into? What did this prophecy mean for him, and for Earth? Before he could ask another question, Elira turned away, her back to him as she called for her advisors. Nathan, still standing in the center of the room, had no choice but to follow her gaze. He didn't know what was happening or why, but he could feel it in the air, in the way the Queen had looked at him. Something had shifted. And he wasn't sure if it was something he could control. The moment felt like the beginning of something far greater than he could ever have imagined. Nathan sat in the grand chamber, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, the prophecy she had spoken about, the strange recognition in her eyes when she had looked at him. He was still reeling from the shock. How could he, a simple soldier, be part of something so important? The room was quiet now, the heavy tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Queen Elira had excused herself, leaving him alone with her most trusted advisors, who looked just as confused as he felt. They stood in a corner of the chamber, whispering among themselves in the Vartal language, their eyes occasionally flicking toward him. Nathan couldn't understand the words, but the way they looked at him told him everything he needed to know. They didn't trust him. What did they expect? He was just a human, just a soldier, a representative of Earth sent to negotiate peace, nothing more. He had no special abilities, no ancient powers, nothing to make him stand out. But then why had the Queen reacted the way she did? Why had she spoken of a prophecy? He couldn't make sense of it. One of the advisors, a tall Vartal male with dark, leathery skin and piercing blue eyes, approached him. Nathan noticed that the others watched the exchange closely, as if ready to intervene at a moment's notice. You don't understand what's happening, do you? The advisor asked, his voice deep and steady. Nathan shook his head. I don't understand any of this. The Vartal advisor crossed his arms, studying Nathan carefully. You have no idea who you really are, do you? Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know how to explain it. He had no idea why the Queen had looked at him the way she did, or why she had mentioned a prophecy. All he knew was that he had been sent here to do a job, and now everything seemed to be spinning out of control. The advisor, sensing Nathan's confusion, sighed heavily and lowered his voice. You're more than just a soldier, human, you always have been. Nathan stared at him, feeling the weight of the words sink in. More than just a soldier, what did that mean? Before he could ask, the advisor stepped closer and spoke again. There's a story among the Vartals. A prophecy that speaks of a human, one who will rise to stand with our Queen, someone who will change the future of the galaxy. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. The prophecy, the Queen had mentioned it too, the advisor continued. For centuries, we've believed it to be a legend, a tale to inspire hope, but now, Now it seems the prophecy is real. But I'm just... Nathan started, but the advisor raised a hand, cutting him off. You're not just anything. You've been chosen, Captain Nathan Drake. Chosen for something far greater than you can understand. The words didn't make sense to Nathan. How could he, a soldier trained for combat and diplomacy, be chosen for something as monumental as a prophecy? He didn't feel special. He didn't feel like anything other than a man trying to do his job and survive in a galaxy full of powerful, ancient civilizations. As he struggled to make sense of what the advisor had said, the chamber door opened, and Queen Alira walked back in. She was followed by a group of her personal guards, tall and imposing, their eyes scanning the room as they took their positions near the walls. Alira's eyes locked onto Nathan immediately, and for a moment he thought he saw something else there, something softer, perhaps even. Regret, but it was gone so quickly that he wasn't sure if he had imagined it. She moved toward him with grace, her footsteps barely making a sound on the marble floor. When she reached him, she stopped, standing only a few feet away. Nathan could feel the weight of her gaze as if she were measuring him, trying to figure out if he truly was the one the prophecy spoke of. "I'm sorry for the confusion earlier, Captain Drake," Alira said, her voice calm but firm. "I did not expect this." Nathan didn't know what she meant by this, but he was too overwhelmed by everything to ask. "I don't understand, Your Majesty. What exactly is happening here? What prophecy are you talking about?" The Queen looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read him. "It's a prophecy that has been passed down through generations of Vartal rulers. It speaks of a human who will join our people in a time of great need. Someone who will stand by our side, guide us, and help us survive the trials ahead." Nathan's mind raced. "But I'm just a soldier. I don't have any special powers or knowledge." Alira's expression softened, and she took a step closer to him. "You may not understand it yet, but you have something. Something that the Vartals have been waiting for. Something that will unlock the future of our people." Nathan stared at her, his heart beating faster. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a hero. I'm not part of any prophecy. I was just sent here to make a deal with your people." The Queen's gaze hardened slightly, though her tone remained calm. "It's not just about the deal, Captain. It never was. You have a destiny, whether you accept it or not, and it is connected to the future of my people." Nathan was silent for a long moment. Everything she was saying felt impossible. How could he, a human soldier, be part of something so important? He had no training for something like this. He was just doing his job. "I can't do this," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. "I'm not the one you're looking for." The Queen's gaze never wavered. "The prophecy doesn't care what you think, Captain. The galaxy doesn't care about your doubts or your fears. It will push you forward whether you're ready or not." Nathan wanted to argue, to protest. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't ready for this, that he wasn't equipped for whatever future she had in mind. But the way she looked at him, with such certainty, made him hesitate. There was something about her, something in the way she carried herself, that made him want to believe her. The Queen stepped back slightly, her eyes still locked on him. "You will undergo tests, trials to prove your worth. Only then will you truly understand the role you must play." Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Tests? Trials? What kind of tests? What kind of trials? He was a soldier, not a prophet, but he could see it in her eyes. This wasn't a request. This was something he had no choice in. "Until then," Alira said, turning to her advisors, "Captain Drake is to remain in the palace. He will be prepared for what's to come." Nathan stood there, feeling more lost than ever. He didn't know what awaited him in the trials or what the Queen had planned. But one thing was certain. His life had just been turned upside down. He wasn't sure if he could live up to the Queen's expectations or if he even wanted to. But there was no going back now. Whatever this prophecy was, whatever destiny had been laid out for him, Nathan knew he was part of something much bigger than himself. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Nathan stood in the quiet chamber, his mind racing as he tried to come to grips with the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. Queen Alira had left him alone with her advisors to prepare for the trials that lay ahead, and every part of him wanted to refuse. How could they ask him to undergo these tests when he didn't even understand what was happening? He was a soldier, trained for combat and strategy, but this felt like something he was never prepared for, something much bigger than him. His heart still raced as he processed everything. The queen had said he was part of a prophecy, a human destined to change the future of the Vartals. But what did that even mean? Why him? What was it about his face, his presence, that had caused the queen to freeze and stare at him with such intensity? He looked around the room, taking in his surroundings. The chamber was lavish, decorated with fine tapestries that depicted scenes from Vartal history, great battles, the rise of empires, and ancient rituals. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy Nathan couldn't quite place. Everything here was alien, distant from the world he knew. And yet it was his reality now. No longer was he just a human soldier on a diplomatic mission. He was something else now, someone else. His thoughts were interrupted as the door opened with a soft whoosh. A Vartal guard stepped in, a tall figure with glowing blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness of the room. Without a word, the guard motioned for Nathan to follow. "Come with me," the guard said, his voice deep but neutral. Nathan hesitated but followed. He had no choice. Whatever the queen had planned, whatever these trials were, he had to face them. He didn't know why he was being tested, but he would have to see it through. The halls of the palace were vast and ornate, lined with alien sculptures and paintings that seemed to shift and move in the dim light. Nathan could feel the weight of the palace's history pressing down on him as they walked through the corridors. It was as if the very walls were watching him, waiting for him to fulfill some ancient purpose. They reached a large chamber at the far end of the palace. The room was open and circular, with a high ceiling that stretched far above them. In the center of the room stood a stone platform, surrounded by glowing symbols etched into the floor. The air felt heavy, almost charged, as if the space itself was alive with power. Nathan stopped at the entrance, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of unease. "This is where the trials will take place," the guard answered simply. "The tests you must undergo to prove yourself." Nathan's stomach tightened. He had no idea what the trials would be, but he could feel the weight of their importance. The guard motioned for him to step forward, and Nathan did so, his boots making a soft thud on the stone floor as he approached the platform. A moment later, the doors to the chamber opened and Queen Alira entered. She was followed by several of her advisors, all of whom watched Nathan closely. There was no doubt in his mind now, this was serious. These trials weren't just about proving his strength. They were about proving his worth in ways he couldn't yet understand. Alira's eyes met his as she walked toward him. There was something different in her expression now, less of the commanding ruler and more of a curious figure, watching him closely as though she was waiting for something to happen. "You are ready," she said, her voice steady but filled with an edge of expectation. "Ready for what?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. He wasn't sure if he was ready for anything, let alone what she had in mind. The queen looked at him for a long moment, her gaze never leaving his face. "You will undergo 3 tests," she explained. "Each one will challenge you in different ways. You will be tested in mind, in body, and in spirit. The first test will measure your strength, your physical endurance. The second test will test your resolve, your ability to make decisions under pressure. The third test will challenge your very soul, your heart." Nathan swallowed hard. These weren't just tests. These were trials of everything he was, his body, his mind, his very essence. How could he possibly pass? He was just a soldier. He had no idea what it took to be the one from the prophecy. "You may begin," Alira said, her voice commanding. Before Nathan could respond, the floor beneath him shifted. The glowing symbols around the platform flickered and began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light across the room. Suddenly, the floor opened up, revealing a deep pit beneath him. He instinctively took a step back, but the guard's voice rang out. "The first test begins now," the guard said, his tone flat. "You must cross the chasm. There is only one path, an unstable bridge made of energy. Cross it, and you will pass the first test." Nathan's gaze shifted downward. The pit was deep, far deeper than he could see. The bridge that stretched across it was barely visible, a thin line of flickering energy. There was no railing, no safety net, just the bridge and the empty void below. His heart raced. There was no way to know if the bridge would hold. No way to predict what would happen if he slipped. But the queen's eyes were on him, watching every movement. He had no choice but to trust that he could make it across. Taking a deep breath, Nathan stepped onto the bridge. The energy beneath his feet buzzed with power, and he felt a brief jolt as his weight settled on it. The bridge shifted under him, and for a moment he feared it would collapse. But he took another step, then another, each one a test of his nerves, of his resolve. The further he went, the more the bridge trembled. He could hear the energy pulsing beneath him, and his heart pounded in his chest. It was as if the bridge itself was alive, reacting to his every movement. But Nathan didn't stop. He couldn't. The Queen's gaze, steady and unwavering, pushed him forward. Every step was harder than the last, but he forced himself to focus, to ignore the fear building in his chest. There was no room for hesitation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Nathan reached the other side. He exhaled in relief, his heart racing as he stepped onto solid ground. The energy bridge shimmered once more before dissipating into the air, leaving no trace of its existence. "You've passed the first test," Alira said, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan's legs felt weak, but he steadied himself, taking a deep breath. His mind raced. That was only the first test. There were still 2 more to go. The chamber shifted again, and the floor began to tremble. The second test was about to begin. Nathan stood at the edge of the platform, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. His legs still felt unsteady from crossing the energy bridge, the fear and adrenaline coursing through his body. The first test had been terrifying. He had never been so close to falling, so close to failure. But somehow he had made it across. Now, as he stood there in the chamber, he knew that the worst was far from over. Queen Alira stood silently, watching him, her expression unreadable. Her advisors stood in the shadows, observing, waiting. Nathan could feel their eyes on him, each one of them assessing him, judging him. He had passed the first test, but what awaited him in the second? The chamber suddenly grew colder, the air around him thick with tension. A low hum filled the space, vibrating through the floor beneath his boots. Nathan glanced around, trying to make sense of the change in atmosphere. He hadn't noticed before, but now he could see that the walls of the chamber were lined with strange, alien symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. They seemed to pulse with an energy that matched the beating of his heart. Without warning, the floor before him shifted once more, and a new path began to take shape. It wasn't a bridge this time, but a series of narrow platforms that stretched out into the unknown. Each one hovered just above the ground, glowing with the same eerie light as the symbols on the walls. There was no railing, no safety net. It was a test of balance, of decision-making under pressure. The second test had begun. A voice broke the silence. It was the same deep, commanding tone of the Vartal advisor who had spoken to him earlier. "You will now face the second test," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You must make it across the platforms to the other side. There is no clear path forward. You will be forced to make choices, quick decisions, each one more difficult than the last. You have no time to think. Your instincts will guide you." Nathan's heart pounded harder as he stared at the path ahead. The platforms were narrow, the gaps between them wide. There was no telling what would happen if he fell. Would he be caught? Or would the fall be the end of him? He didn't know, and the uncertainty made the challenge all the more terrifying. But there was no turning back. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to give up now. Taking a deep breath, Nathan stepped onto the first platform. It swayed slightly under his weight, but it held firm. The glow beneath him flickered for a moment, casting shadows across the chamber before returning to its steady hum. He moved forward, placing one foot in front of the other, focusing on each step, keeping his balance steady. As he reached the second platform, he felt a sudden shift in the air. Something in the room seemed to change, and he realized that this wasn't just a test of physical skill. It was a test of his ability to make quick decisions, to trust his instincts when faced with danger. The platforms ahead of him were no longer steady. They began to move, shifting and tilting in ways that made Nathan's heart race. He had to act fast. He could see a platform further ahead, but it was too far to reach in a single step. He had no choice but to jump. Without thinking, Nathan leapt, his body sailing through the air as the platform below him shifted again. He felt his feet connect with the next platform, but the impact threw him off balance. He stumbled, barely catching himself before falling. His hands gripped the edge of the platform, and he pulled himself up, panting hard. The glow beneath him flickered again, as if the platforms were testing him, challenging him to make another move. The path ahead was even more uncertain now, and the platforms seemed to move faster, shifting in unpredictable ways. There was no time to waste. Nathan looked ahead, his mind racing. Another jump, another decision. He couldn't hesitate. He couldn't afford to stop and think. His instincts took over, and without another moment's pause, he pushed forward, leaping from one platform to the next. The next few moments passed in a blur. He leapt, shifted, balanced, and moved, his body responding to the challenge without thought. Each time he landed, he had to quickly adjust to the new angle of the platform, feeling the pressure of time pushing him forward. His muscles burned with effort, but he refused to stop. His mind was sharp, focused entirely on the task at hand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Nathan reached the final platform. He stood there for a moment, catching his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The floor beneath him steadied, and the hum of the chamber seemed to quiet for a moment. He had done it. He had passed the second test. But as he stood there, looking up at Queen Alira, who had been watching him the entire time, a new feeling crept over him. It wasn't relief. It was fear. He had crossed the physical challenge, but now the real test had yet to come. Alira stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. "You have passed the second test," she said, her voice steady. "But now we move to the final trial." Nathan's stomach tightened. The first two tests had pushed him to his physical and mental limits, but this was something else. The Queen's eyes held a look of quiet anticipation, as if she were waiting for him to step into the unknown. He had no idea what the third test would be, but he knew it would be the hardest of all. The floor beneath him shifted again, but this time it wasn't a physical challenge. This time the entire chamber seemed to change. The air grew heavier, the walls seeming to close in on him, and for the first time since he had entered the palace, Nathan felt a wave of uncertainty. The bright lights of the chamber flickered, and a coldness seeped into the air. He shivered involuntarily. "You must face the final test," Alira said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "This is the trial of your soul. You must confront your deepest fear, your greatest regret. Only then will you understand your true purpose." Nathan felt a knot form in his stomach, his deepest fear. His greatest regret, what was she asking of him? How could he face something so personal? Before he could respond, the room shifted again, the air now thick with a palpable tension. Shadows began to creep along the edges of the chamber, darkening the space, and suddenly a vision appeared before him. It was of a battle he had fought in long ago on a distant planet. He could see the faces of his fallen comrades, the soldiers he had lost, the ones he hadn't been able to save. The guilt and regret of that moment washed over him like a tidal wave. He had been the leader, the one in charge, and yet he had failed them. He had failed. The vision seemed to surround him, the faces of the dead soldiers staring at him, accusing him, blaming him for their deaths. The weight of their loss crushed him. He had never been able to forgive himself. And now, in this moment, it seemed like his past had come back to haunt him. But then, something within him shifted. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a man haunted by guilt. He was the one chosen to stand by the Queen's side. He was part of something greater. Slowly, Nathan's fear began to fade. The faces of his fallen comrades didn't accuse him. They reminded him of his strength, his resolve. He had fought for them, and he would continue to fight for the future, for those who were still alive. The guilt would never completely leave him, but he had to let it go in order to move forward. The vision faded, and the chamber fell silent once more. Nathan turned to face Queen Alira. She had watched him closely, her expression unreadable. "You have passed the final test," she said, her voice calm but filled with respect. "You have faced your fear, your regret, and emerged stronger for it. You are ready." Nathan's heart raced, but this time it was different. He had faced his inner demons, and he had come out the other side. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the prophecy held for him, he was ready. The journey was only beginning. Nathan stood silently, his chest rising and falling with every breath, his mind still racing from the final trial. He had faced his deepest fears, confronted the ghosts of his past, and somehow emerged stronger. His legs were unsteady, but he stood tall. The last trial had tested him in ways he never imagined. But now, as the chamber slowly returned to its normal stillness, he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey had only just begun. Queen Alira stood before him, her eyes filled with quiet admiration, though her expression remained as composed as ever. Nathan had passed all 3 trials, but there was something about the way she looked at him now that made him feel like he had just crossed a threshold, a point of no return. "You have done well, Captain Drake," she said, her voice softer now, almost approving. "You have proven yourself worthy of the prophecy." Nathan's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the prophecy. He had heard those words so many times over the last few days, but each time, they felt more and more like a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. The human warrior, the one who would change the fate of the Vartal Empire and the galaxy. How could he live up to that? I don't know if I'm the one you're looking for, Nathan admitted, his voice quieter than he intended. I'm just a soldier. I didn't ask for any of this. Alira regarded him thoughtfully, as though considering his words carefully. No one ever asks for destiny, Captain, she replied gently. But sometimes destiny chooses us whether we are ready or not. The galaxy needs leaders. It needs warriors. And you, Nathan Drake, are one of those leaders. He swallowed hard, feeling a mix of confusion, fear, and responsibility all at once. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had only wanted to serve, to protect, to do his duty. But this was something entirely different. The Queen was right in one way. Destiny had come for him whether he was prepared for it or not. Before he could respond, Alira turned and gestured for him to follow her. Come, she said, her voice once again carrying the weight of command. There is much to discuss. Nathan hesitated for a moment but then followed her. He knew there was no turning back now. Whatever lay ahead, he had to face it. He had passed the trials, and now he had to understand what it all meant. Why had the prophecy singled him out? What was his role in the future of the Vartal Empire? They walked in silence through the vast corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. Nathan's mind was still processing everything, trying to understand what he had just been through. The trials had pushed him to the limit, forced him to confront things he had buried deep inside. He had passed, but was he truly ready for whatever came next? Alira led him into a large chamber at the heart of the palace. The room was circular, its walls adorned with the ancient history of the Vartals. But what caught Nathan's attention was the large map that took up most of one wall. It was a star chart, depicting not just the Vartal Empire, but the entire galaxy. Hundreds of stars, planets, and systems were marked on it, glowing with a faint light. This is the galaxy, Alira said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. And this, she pointed to a glowing dot in the center of the map, is where we are now. Nathan's eyes followed her gesture. The dot was surrounded by hundreds of other stars, some of which were flickering with a dim red light. Others were bright and pulsing, indicating areas of power or importance. There was one particularly large star that seemed to draw his attention, its light brighter than the others. What does it mean? Nathan asked, trying to make sense of the map. Alira's eyes narrowed as if contemplating her next words. This is where the Vartals stand now, she said slowly. The galaxy is on the brink of chaos. There are forces at play that seek to destabilize everything we have built. There are those who would see the Vartals fall, and with us, the entire galaxy. Nathan frowned, trying to understand. Who are these forces? Enemies both known and unknown, she replied. The Galactic Council is fractured. Factions within it are plotting against us, against Earth, and against the stability of the entire galaxy. We have enemies who want to see us destroyed, who want to see humanity crushed, and they are growing stronger. Nathan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What can we do about it? Alira's gaze grew even more intense. We need a leader. Someone who can unite the galaxy's factions, someone who can bridge the divide between humanity and the other species, someone who can face the coming storm and ensure the survival of us all. Nathan blinked in surprise. You want me to lead? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. But I'm just a soldier. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a king. I don't know anything about politics or war on a galactic scale. Alira nodded solemnly. And that is why you must lead. Her voice was unwavering. You see, Captain Drake, the galaxy is divided, but your humanity, holds a power that the other species do not understand. You are not bound by the rules of the galaxy. You do not carry the weight of ancient traditions or endless histories. You are free to make decisions that no one else can, and that is why you are the one chosen, to unite us all. Nathan's mind swirled with the enormity of what she was saying. Could he really be the one to bring peace to the galaxy? Could he, a simple soldier, really lead an empire into the future? You have already proven yourself worthy, Alira continued. The trials were just the beginning. Now you must learn to navigate the complexities of leadership, of diplomacy, of war. You must learn to trust in yourself and in those around you. Nathan looked at the map again, his mind racing. He could see the paths to different star systems, the many factions that filled the galaxy. Some of them were close allies, others were distant neighbors, and some were open enemies. It seemed impossible to bring them all together to forge a future where they could coexist. But something inside him stirred, a sense of responsibility, of duty. He had always believed in the importance of unity, in the strength of working together. And maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to make a real difference. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice stronger now, filled with a quiet determination. Elira's expression softened, and for the first time Nathan saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You will begin by gathering allies. The first step is to forge new relationships, build trust with those who will stand with us. You will need to negotiate, to lead, and sometimes to fight. But remember this, Captain, you do not stand alone. You stand with me, with the Vartal Empire, and with humanity." Nathan nodded, the weight of her words settling in. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but this was his path now. He had been chosen, and he couldn't turn his back on what the Queen had entrusted him with. "Let's begin," he said, his voice steady, as he turned to face the map once more. Elira smiled, and in that moment Nathan knew that whatever the future held, he was ready to face it. He was ready to lead. The galaxy's fate lay in his hands, and he would not fail.